A big topic here today, AI and trust. I think we should just dive right in. Right? Gary, I want to start with you. Since you have Gary, we have to go to you first. Let's talk about the first thing. Think about the primary challenges that we talked about at the beginning that the organizations are facing, right? How are they going to establish this trust? But also, let's focus on breaking it apart, the collection and the pre-processing.
Right. So education has been mentioned a couple of times, right? So building trust is a process, right? This is not a binary value. This is something that needs to be worked on, right? And I think the key issue with establishing trust, right, in especially a topic as technical as this, right, is making sure that the stakeholders, the domain experts, right, the people who are actually going to be providing the things like metrics, right, and standards for success, right, they understand what is and is not possible, right, and what kinds of things are feasible, right, with these types of tools and models. So the things like pre-processing versus collection of data, those topics are much more technical. I think the trust issue is a lot more broad than just the technical details of, how exactly do we set up a data collection pipeline. So, the overall framework here, I think, ought to be that you have the way that we have done it, at least, right, is that we have a centralized function in the company, which is kind of an AI risk and governance group, right, which involves people from multiple different parts of the organization. So legal organization, contracts, engineering, CTO office, right, and we debate, right? So this is something where we are supposed to provide guidance to the rest of the organization across functional, in a cross-functional way to give people an idea of what are the guiding principles, right, for building systems. So for example, if somebody wants to use a particular data set for a particular problem, right, what are the issues that they need to think about? What are the kinds of questions that they need to ask, right, before they start, right? So do they have the rights to use this data for this purpose, right? Do we have a complete chain of provenance for this data set? Where did it come from? How was it collected, right? Who are the upstream providers? What are their processes? What do they look like? And so on and so forth, right? So this is not a simple thing, right? This is something that needs a function around it, right? And a lot of careful thought.
That's actually great, and I loved everything you said, especially when you started about with education. So I'm going to move on to AJ, if you don't mind. But with education also comes transparency. People have to feel comfortable that the whole process is being, so I understand it now, that was a great answer, but how do I see it being transparent?
Great question. Transparency is very important. We talk a lot about AI, and we have done a phenomenal job in the last couple of decades in terms of AI, and especially machine learning and deep learning, and basically managing and handling a lot of data. And we've been making significant progress, basically producing accurate answers. What we're realizing right now, we're missing a very important element into the equation, and that's the human element. Humans need to trust the system. Human needs to understand that what's coming out of that AI system, we need to establish that partnership. Unfortunately today, most AI systems, conventional AI systems, machine learning and deep learning, they're black boxes, okay? They will give you a result, but they cannot explain how they arrived at the result. We represent an organization that was a spin-off from the NASA program. I can tell you, NASA will not place an asset in space if they did not know how you arrived at the answer and provide a step-by-step audit trail to basically get you to that recommendation. So just stating that we eventually gonna get an accurate answer, to me, in a critical sectors is not good enough. We need to provide that audit trail. We need to provide that transparency so human users can basically trust the system.
Great. So now we talked about education. We talked about transparency. but now we got to talk about bias and diversity. So what do you think? Arya?
I think I agree with my colleague here. We actually had a meeting yesterday with the hospital here where we're doing a lot of the AI, and the way that we think about bias, in particular, I think one step back on the issue of trust before we get to bias. What this reminds me of is when we had the internet and people were afraid of putting their credit card online. And I remember there was a lot of debate. People would say, I would never do that. I would never have my credit card online. And the way that kind of we approach this is there is a fundamental bias of being skeptical about anything that's not human-made. So in particular, in where we operate, which is highly regulated industries, so we're doing healthcare, insurance, and banking. And we're the application layer of AI, where we often joke that nobody uses, like you can't eat AI. You only get the business results that AI can generate. So we've almost outlawed the use of the word AI in sales conversations because it creates more problem than it solves. What's the outcome? So on the bias yesterday with a hospital chain that we're doing the medical coding, and in highly regulated spaces that we operate, it's a very high-stake environment. So these are human lives on the line. And the trust is not only for your data privacy, but on the outcome. You can't have a risk of hallucinations when you have a human life on the line. You can't have a black box solution where it says this is the medical code or diagnosis. So the audit trail is very important. And the key point that I want to make on bias is a lot of kind of the reinforcement learning through human feedback that everybody uses in training these AI models. We have found that what happens is the AI makes the recommendation and for edge cases, and the human either agrees or disagrees. And that agreement will train the AI model or disagree with it. And what we have found is more often than not, the human will agree because it's just an easier option. It takes less thought. You can't incentivize real critical thinking. So bias starts forming in the model because there's a real confirmation bias. So there's this kind of model drift and reinforcement learning drift that begins happening. So having really objective AI models that give you an answer and not a subjective human-trained machine is difficult. And the more AI trains on AI-generate data, the bias will drift even more and more and more. So really focusing on rules and objective truth with a clear audit trail on the reasons behind that step, I think is the only way to minimize the bias risk.
So I know you want to add to that. I just got one follow-up question. But you put humans in the data quality chain.
Yeah.
Explain that a little more.
Yeah, so this kind of unlocked the whole LLM. I mean, OpenAI, everyone else has this kind of reinforcement learning through human feedback, which I think is spiritually very interesting because you have the human being kind of, is a human machine kind of a joint venture in creating this thought. But humans are full of bias. No matter what training you give people, there is a fundamental bias. And that seeps into any model you have. So I think, we are not at a point to have unsupervised learning yet, at least in high-stake environments that isn't, a GIF in Mid-Journey or something that doesn't have a real repercussion for a government or a business.
I love that I'm in a JV now with AI. I love that as a human. Gary, I know you had a follow-on.
So bias is a huge topic, right? And we cannot possibly do it justice in a panel like this. So just for a point of reference, in a course that I teach at Columbia, I have 6 hours of lecture on this topic alone, right? So this is a big umbrella term for a lot of different issues, right? Because bias can mean a lot of different things, right? So there are temporal biases, there's selection bias, there is kind of all kinds of other issues that you have to deal with in practice. So there is a whole field of study within the machine learning and AI space, which is called algorithmic fairness, which is kind of a technical approach to addressing problems of bias in a very, very broad way. And if people are interested in a kind of introductory book on this topic, there is actually a great book which was written just recently by Aaron Roth and Michael Kearns, which is called The Ethical Algorithm. So, you know, it's not purely about ethics, it's actually about this exact issue. Like, how do you deal with issues of bias in machine learning systems and automation, right, in mission critical domains such as things like medicine and, you know, finance, right, and so on.
That's a great follow-up. So AJ, we talked about a lot of different things, but I do have a question for you. How about data quality?
If you just allow me unbiased and I'll answer
Sure,
the data
not a
quality.
problem.
Okay, because it is an important issue.
Okay.
You know, bias is a big problem, and I think we need to address bias. One thing I'm concerned about is unintentional bias. Okay, that is a scary thing, because with intentional bias, at least we can put guardrails to basically figure it out. I think we all learned about that famous algorithm by a big AI company where they were trying to identify a snow fox from a husky. And the system, the algorithm, was pretty accurate, picked almost 99 images, classified them as a snow fox, and it failed in one picture. And they didn't understand why. And again, we go back to this black box concept, you know. In reality, what happened, the algorithm was really developed to basically be a great snow classifier, not a, you know, snow facts classifier. So those are the kind of things that we need to make sure that we have guardrails in the system for what I call an intentional bias. And that happens with explainability and audit trail. I can get back to your question.
No, let's go back to data quality, though. You're not going to get out of the question.
So on the data quality, you know what? In an ideal world, it would be great if we can deal with clean, pristine data all the time. But I can tell you that's not the reality, especially in the industrial setting. We're going to deal with messy data. We're going to deal with misleading data. We're going to deal with conflicted data. So we really need to create AI system that can handle those type of conditions, you know. You cannot basically create a system where it's going to tell you, oops, you know, your data is corrupt, I got to stop. That would be a disaster. For us at NASA, imagine sending a $4 billion spacecraft and now going back telling the taxpayers, well, we ran into a problem. I think they would shut NASA in no time. So the idea is we need to come up with an approach, you know, we call it a hybrid approach. It's really similar to how the human brain thinks. We as humans sometimes, when you present me with a concept where I feel like I'm missing some rules, or I'm missing some elements, or I'm having contradictory elements or rules in my equation, because of my memory, because of our symbolic thinking, because of our gut feeling, because of the way we were educated, we are able to basically figure out how to resolve these issues and problems and continue with the solution. And that's what we need to get into in our AI systems, you know, to be able to handle, you know, situations are less than ideal.
Wow, I love the passion with everybody. The main topic today was trust. So Aria, back to you. But as we move forward, sometimes innovation trumps ethical considerations. And we need to have trust in the systems. How are we going to handle that going forward?
That's a good question.
Tough question.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I'd make 3 points here. Number one, a comment on AJ's point on data quality. Just one thing interesting we've seen is we're now starting to label data quality between human-generated and AI-generated. So even though it can be very structured data, if it's created by an AI, you have AIs training on AI, so you lose the signal that is that human thought. So I think probably 2 years ago, we reached peak human data on a data set. And I think now the majority of, not majority, I mean the majority of new generated content or data is AI generated. So I think the quality piece is not only structured, unstructured, but also human versus computer generated. That's one. Number two, on innovation and regulation. So the Applied AI company, we are a UAE homegrown AI company. we are exporting AI into the United States. We're doing millions of medical records of U.S. folks per month. So this is something that we deal with all the time. You know, wires, and it's one thing to kind of buy AI here, but it's one thing to build it and sell it there. So we deal with the idea of kind of regulation around this data and how we can train the data. And I think that one reason why we chose the UAE and moved all our engineers from San Francisco and Germany, et cetera, to the UAE is because of this fact. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can do as a government in this high pace of innovation is to over-regulate AI. I think Europe has done it pretty early on. I think there's reasons for and against, but I do think as the world will start competing more and more towards how advanced and how incredibly powerful these AI models are, I think it will affect almost every single industry from elections to military, etc. You cannot hamper yourself by these regulations. So fostering innovation and is key, but at what cost? So you have to pick the cost. And we have most of my executive team and engineers who have met government folks here were absolutely mind blown at the public-private partnerships on how responsive they are to real learnings and real requests that we have. Whereas if you try to do this in the United States or Europe, it's years or months before anything changes. So the only main takeaway I hope about this point that kind of resonates is do not overregulate AI, because the pace of innovation is so fast. You cannot think of every possible outcome, and you will fall behind.
So trust is our main topic. So I know, Gary, I know you have a couple of things to say about it, and then AJ, we're going to go to you on the same topic. Go, Gary.
Right, so this is a tough question, right? So ethics is a big topic. And I come back to two things on this. So first, again, education. So it's important, I think, to actually teach our data scientists and engineers ethics. And the good news is that many of my colleagues in the academic community have actually started doing so. So for example, Barbara Gross at Harvard actually teaches a full semester course on ethics to engineers, right? So what are the different types of ethical systems, right? What kinds of ethical guidelines are appropriate for a particular type of decision making? But not everybody is going to go back to school for something like this, right? So I think it's very important for people to actually engage with this topic. And one of the things that I think is important is kind of communicating a sort of a kind of executive summary style sort of material to people to familiarize them, right, with the issues, right, that they might encounter in practice. So one example of something like that is a paper which was published in the Public Library of Science, which was called 10 Simple Rules for Big Data Research, right? So, and this was published by a collaboration between people in different parts of academia, and they borrowed most of these rules actually from bioethicists. Right, so a lot of issues, right, especially with things like medical applications, right, they kind of come, they do not change, right, depending on like whether you're doing it in healthcare or in finance or whatever. So I highly recommend reading that paper, and I think we need more things like that.
Thank you. AJ.
Trust.
Trust and ethics.
And ethics. By the way, I agree with you. I think we need to make sure that all data scientists, all AI engineers basically take ethics and compliance. I'm a big believer in that. We're practicing that, by the way, so it's a very important step. Trust. In the US, in the Midwest, we have so many use cases that is basically jamming our court system, that right now they're using machine algorithms to basically process use cases. So imagine, you are in the justice system in the Midwest, an AI system, a machine learning system will basically judge whether you're innocent or guilty. How would you like that? Okay. For me, I am willing to accept that, provided one thing. If that system has an audit trail and explainability factor, I'll take it. Because then I can go back to the system, understand step by step how they arrived at the decision. Ladies and gentlemen, we are moving in the direction where we really need to see collaboration between AI and the human race. I'm here to tell you AI is not going to replace the human race. Gartner estimates by the mid-1930s, 1935s, 40% of us, imagine 40% of this room, will have an AI as a manager, okay? If that's the case, we need to basically figure out a way to collaborate with AI, establish trust, okay? Because I think the future is bright. We can embrace it. They're not gonna replace our jobs. Now, there are certain jobs that needs to be replaced because AI is better at them, but I think AI will create more jobs for us. So I think if we start thinking about a way where we can embrace true collaboration between AI and the human race, establishing trust, establishing transparency, establishing audit trail, I think this is gonna improve society.
I love a couple of things that we're saying. So first, I'm going to go to you in a second. First, I just heard I'm in a human JV with AI, and now I'm going to work for AI. Aria, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think this point, and again, I think that this is where it's a little bit different between kind of the theory and the academics and the regulation, the ministers and people on the ground that are doing this every single day. I think there's a big departure between the desire for regulation and the reality of enforcement of regulation. So all AI is, for people who are doing it, is a file of 5 megabytes or less of weights, right? It's just numbers, in a row. Once that model is trained on data, how are you going to regulate? How are you going to enforce it? You're going to go and remove the weights? You can write these things down. So I think the reality is by the time we set up laws and regulation and an oversight committee and enforcement, and then how many court cases are going to go through to analyze these text files, it's just impossible. And I think that's why the ethics of it needs to be on the engineers. It needs to be self-policing. It needs to be, there's no government. The regulatory arbitrage that's going to happen, whoever regulates it, you just have the file incorporated in another country. You have no jurisdiction to remove a weights text file, right? So I think whoever wins the regulatory arbitrage race will end up with the majority of the profits that AI will generate in the next 10 years.
So we have about 8 minutes left. I have 2 more questions, but I really would like all of you to opine on it. The first question is, so give me some rapid answers on this one. The first question is data insecurity, right? I mean, we hear about this every single time we talk to someone about AI. It's data security, data privacy. Okay, maybe you can each just give me a quick answer on that. Gary, why don't we start with you?
Right. Well, this is, not new as an issue, right? So privacy and security have been with us, right, since, since time immemorial, right? And as we build more and more powerful systems, right, this only becomes a more important issue, right? So it doesn't have to be a generative AI model or an LLM or something like that. So we have seen many, many cases of things like, for example, information leaking in, recommendation systems, like a famous case at Target, for example, knows when, somebody is pregnant before they know it themselves based on the pattern of purchases and stuff like that, right? So there is no simple answer, right? So this comes back to issues that my co-panelists have raised, right? This is down to things like interpretability of artificial intelligence models, right? It is down to methods for detecting things like bias, right, and data issues, right, and to good practices, right? So organizational practices. So security is not, security of data is not a issue which is unique to artificial intelligence. This is a much, much broader thing that we have had to deal with forever.
I'm going to keep moving on.
Security is very important, and you need to look at it through the entire life chain, okay? From data acquisition to pre-processing to training the model to post-processing. You have to develop the processes and the systems in place, and you got to look at it at every single phase. That's how we can basically secure our entire life cycle.
Thank Arya.
So real quick, we're again a UAE homegrown AI company. We started with 2 engineers. Now we're 100 engineers doing 1 million medical records in the United States. We get CFIUS and HIPAA and SOC 2 asking us about these questions where we have to prove security. So we've passed all these measures. The only thing I would say is the measure against insecurity of data is not against a utopian idea of 100% secure. It's against the alternative. The alternative, the manual way things are done today, are actually far less secure than the way that we're doing it. So one example is a lot of these are being sent to India with BPOs. They're attached in PDF files by email sent to India that a human being opens up on their computer, does the work, and sends it back. They're personal medical records. So the AI, even though it's not 100% secure, is done on AWS in the UAE, on GovCloud, with a full audit trail, with no human look. So security is compared to the alternative, not a utopian ideal.
Great. So this is a 1-minute answer. So I was in another session, and they were talking about adopting AI is not enough. You really have to operationalize it to get value. How are companies going to get from this adoption stage to operationalizing it effectively to get value out of it? Gary, let's start with you. Quick 1-minute answers.
Right. So this is tough, right? Because for a lot of organizations, this AI kind of technology and automation is new, right? And to be able to actually put this technology into practice and extract value from it, right? You need kind of to build internal competencies, right? Like you need a technology function, you need stakeholders who are educated in kind of the not in a deep technical level, but at least the conceptual level about how these things work and what they can and cannot do, right? Majority of AI projects in the industry fail, right? So we know at least from surveys done by people like Deloitte and Accenture, right? And it is because people set unrealistic expectations or they mismanage the project by not setting out a kind of appropriate framework for it at the outset. Right, so what is the standard for success, right? What kind of resources is this going to require?
You know, I've been dealing with this issue for the past 10 years. If you watch what happened, typically you run into businesses, into digital organizations, and the first thing they ask you is, you need to build a pilot for me. You need to prove the concept for me. And you'll work with a digital organization. You basically build a pilot. I do agree with you. Most will fail simply because the business guys are not involved in the process. But I think we've reached a maturity level right now where businesses are involved upstream in the process, where now we can clearly define what the KPIs for the business, what do we need to do. AI is a tool, and AI can be a very powerful tool that can basically help the business significantly, but that needs to be from day one. We cannot deal with AI projects as we're going to go from a prototype phase until you can convince us the technology is going to work. Then we're going to throw you over the fence, and then you can start talking with businesses. And we're seeing that transition, and I'm very excited about it, and we're seeing some good results.
Extremely well said. Ari, I know you're passionate about this,
Yeah.
so I'm going to let you finish us today.
Okay. So I have a very controversial view on this. I think you don't mention the word AI ever. You don't sell HTML. You don't sell. You sell Oracle. You sell the business results that AI will make. The moment you say the word AI in a sales conversation, you're opening up a 9-month sales cycle. They're going to bring the CEO. They want to do a press release. They're going to bring the lawyer. Look at the data privacy. They're going to bring the marketing guy. The HR person's losing budget. Who's going to get fired? And then you end up with a product that's just a shadow of what it can be. So people don't consume AI. No one cares how you do it. What's the ROI from my investment in this product? Is it cost savings? Is it increase of revenue? So what we do is we measure every single day the productivity increase that AI will give to each individual. We call it the ACO multiple. And we're already at 5x. So with McKinsey, who invested in us, had a manual benchmark against everyone else in the market. You say you use our tool, you 5x the productivity of your employees, which means that your cost basis is now 80% less. End of story. Do you want it or not? So that's the only way we've gotten the sales cycles down from 9 months to, a few weeks. The issue with these kind of hype markets like AI is everyone wants to use the word, and every C-suite executive wants an AI plan, and you got to figure out if you want to be in the generative AI business or the revenue generative AI business. And I think these are very different businesses.
Well, thank you so very much. Some of the key takeaways I heard is, one, we have to be a little smarter about it. And education, I agree with. I'm going to be in a JV with AIs pretty soon. I'm going to work for AI. I kind of love that. And I just heard 40%, and I just heard I shouldn't use the word AI ever again. All right. Thank you so very much for today. Thank you so very much. I hope everybody enjoyed it.